Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillahi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. I begin by praising and thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and asking Him to send His peace and blessings upon His final messenger, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. I'm very grateful that all of you are here today, alhamdulillah. We're going to talk about something that's uplifting and enjoyable, and that's paradise, Jannah. We're going to get into some details about heaven that maybe you've heard of some of them, maybe some of them you haven't heard of before. And Jannah is obviously a very interesting topic, but it's also almost unfortunate that sometimes if you go up to somebody who is interested in something and they go up to you and they ask you about your favorite sport or your favorite activity or your favorite car or your favorite personality or your favorite technology, maybe you can talk about something that you're very passionate about for hours and hours and hours. Maybe you can tell them things that other people don't usually know about it because you follow it online, you listen to podcasts, you watch videos about it because you're so passionate about it. But if somebody comes up to you and asks you about Jannah, then obviously there's some things that you can say about Jannah, but can you really exhaust the so many hours of descriptions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions about Jannah, the people of Jannah, the actions of Jannah, what's waiting for us in the hereafter, and then so many of the ahadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in which he describes Jannah in vivid detail, sometimes in general actions and sometimes in very specific aspects as well. And so this is more of like, it's obviously an introduction, but the same way we can get excited about Jannah, and my hope is that it will awaken something inside of us and we will want to learn more and more about Jannah. May Allah make us amongst the highest of paradise, al-Firdaus al-A'la, as well as the hellfire. May Allah protect us from that, so that we understand our reality better and better every single day, inshallah. Throughout this talk, I sometimes mention the scholars say this, and the scholars say that, and the scholars say A and B and C. And so I put a slide over here to say, okay, what are some of the sources that I leaned on for this talk, so that when I say the scholars say this, I'm talking about some of these references and some of these resources. And I made this talk mostly more for youth and stuff like that. That's why there's like some jokes in there and stuff like that. So if it doesn't make sense, it's fine. It's not a big deal. But a lot of what I'm going to share, inshallah, is from a series by Sheikh Muhammad Adadaw al-Shanqiti, in which he talks about so many descriptions of Jannah. And I remember when I went through that series and I studied some aspects of it, there were things that even as an adult, things that are found in the Quran, things that are from authentic narrations of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that I didn't know about Jannah, and I felt like I should have known that. And so we're going to talk high level, and then we're just going to break it down piece by piece, and then towards the end, inshallah, we'll share one or two actions that we can do starting today, inshallah, to become people of paradise by the mercy and will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the first question I want to ask you, the first kind of idea that I want to present to you is something that the scholars mention, is that right now you're living one out of the three lives that you're going to live. One is the life that you're living right now in the dunya. And in this life, we all have an expiration date. We don't know when it is. Some of us, maybe 20 years, maybe 30 years, maybe 50 years, maybe 80 years, maybe 120 years, maybe a little less, maybe a little bit more. But at some point, all of us are going to pass away from this life in this dunya, and we're going to enter into the next life, which is al-hayatul barzakhiyah, the life in the grave. And the life that people spend underground is much longer than the life that's above ground. And it's possible that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it quick and easy for the righteous. But if you think about your great-grandfathers, your ancestors, you think about the Sahaba, think about so many of these people, may Allah have mercy on them, how many hundreds or thousands of years in some cases have they spent in their grave? And so you have another life that you're going to live as well, and we have to be prepared for that. And then we have the third life, which is al-ukhrawiyah, the life in al-akhirah, the life in the hereafter. And that is a life that goes on forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. And so that one we really need to be prepared for, because everything we do right now will impact us in the barzakh, and what we do right now will impact us in the akhirah. And nobody enters into Jannah, obviously, except by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But one of the things that the scholars mention is that the person who gets the Jannah of this world will, inshallah, get the Jannah of the next world. And so I want somebody maybe to raise their hand or to share with us, well, what is the Jannah of this world that somebody can get, such that if they get the Jannah of this world, then inshallah they have the Jannah of the hereafter. Does anybody want to share something with us? Yes, sir. Say it again. Contentment. You're content with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're content with who you are, some type of contentment. Yes, sir. Say it again. Sure. Sure. Yeah, and I'm sure there's even more than that. So he's talking about following the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the Jannah of this life, and he mentioned other things as well. Yeah. The best in this world. The best in this world, yeah. A righteous wife, the best in this world. So, and this is more just to kind of get our discussion going. Yeah, last one, go ahead. Loving Allah as a messenger, yeah, of course. And loving anything that Allah loves and hating anything that Allah hates, these are definitely part and parcel of the identity of the believer and obviously the identity of the people of Jannah, and Allah knows best. So the idea is that there is a Jannah of this world, and one way to think about it is the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made almost obligatory or mandatory, that if a person does this, then this is a means for this person to enter into Jannah. And obviously, first and foremost, that comes with believing in La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Sometimes you hear about people who, maybe celebrities or certain people that have like a crazy lifestyle and they accept Islam, and then it takes them a while to kind of get back, to kind of get into a normal kind of Muslim lifestyle. But regardless of however long that transition takes, and even for our own journey, the one thing that, inshallah, a person has done when they have lived and died upon La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is that they have at some point freed themselves, inshallah, from the hellfire. And this is our passport into the akhirah, our passport into Jannah. As the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, Man mata wa huwa ya'lamu annahu la ilaha illallah dakhala al-jannah. A person who dies believing this, living this, that there is nothing worthy of your worship, your obedience, your affection, your fear, all of this, other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that the Prophet ﷺ is the last and final messenger, then inshallah this is a person of Jannah. But the question is this a person of Jannah that gets to go immediately into Jannah after the Day of Judgment? Or is this a person that gets to go ma'aliyan after a period of time, after being punished in the hellfire? May Allah protect us from that. We want to be amongst those people that their sajda to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, their sajjada, where they pray, their 5 obligatory prayers, all the obligatory actions upon them, and staying away from the things that are haram. This is their Jannah in this world. And the person who gets the Jannah of this world, meaning being close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the correct way, worshipping Him in the correct way, having khashya of Him, having fear and awe of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the correct way, then inshallah they can be amongst those people that the Prophet ﷺ described will have a window of Jannah in their grave, and every day they're looking at their property in Jannah, and they're hoping and wishing that the Day of Judgment begins so that they can enter into this place of happiness and joy and contentment and this final retirement that will go on forever and ever, and all they will have is happiness after this. And so there is a Jannah in the barzakh as well. And then the actual Jannah, the real Jannah that we're talking about, paradise, is obviously only in the hereafter. And what we're talking about right now is more like metaphor and analogies and things that bring it closer to the actual paradise that's in the hereafter. My question to you is that you have a body and a soul. And sometimes people say you're a body with a soul, but maybe what's more correct is that you're a soul with a body. Who you actually are is this ruh, this soul. And right now you live in a body. And between your body and soul, is there a balance or is it an imbalance? Is it possible that the body is stronger than the soul? Is it possible the soul is stronger than the body? Or is it possible that they have some type of equal weight? And so my next question to you is, in each of these 3 lives, think about if one dominates the other. And so I want us to kind of think about this, that in this life, does our body dominate our soul, or does our soul dominate our body, or do they have an equal weighting? And maybe we can do a type of voting thing to kind of get an idea. So if you think that your body dominates your soul, then you can raise your right hand. And if you think your soul dominates your body, you can raise your left hand, just because in the sequence. And if you think they're equal, then maybe put both of your hands up, so we get an idea. So in this dunya, what do you guys think? Put your hands in one way or the other. If you think the body dominates the soul, then right hand. If soul dominates the body, left hand, and then both hands. And maybe you can just guess. You don't have to just keep your hands down, because then it's like, do you even have a body or a soul? What's going on? Okay. Don't answer yet, because your vote already answered. You already answered it. That's what the voting is for. But you can answer in a little bit. But I'm just trying to get an idea. So we got a little bit of mix. We got some right hands. We got some left hands. We got some 2 hands. We got one hand that's still up. We got one hand that's going like this, because not really sure. So we got a lot going on, mashallah. The scholars mention that in this life, your body dominates your soul. Your body overtakes your soul. It's easier to give in to what your body wants. It's easier for your body to be enticed by something, to be attached to something, and it's harder to please your soul. And the only way a soul can be pleased in this life, which is again the Jannah of this world, is having a correct connection in aqeedah, in fiqh, in worship, in ubudiyah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the only way. And it is an uphill battle. It's not easy to do. It is an incline. And it's sometimes so much so that it falls under the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, in which he says that حُفَّتِ الْجَنَّةُ بِالْمَكَارِهِ وَحُفَّتِ النَّارُ بِالشَّهَوَاتِ. That Jannah is surrounded, and in one narration says حُجِبَت, that Jannah is surrounded with al-makarih, things that are adverse, things that are difficult, things that have struggle with them. And so it's not an easy thing. And the hellfire is surrounded with things that are alluring, things that are desirable, things that are enticing, things that you're attracted to, things that you have a predilection towards, that you have desires towards. And so in this life, you have to have that awareness that, oh, I have to be even stronger than that. It's not one-to-one. I have to be even stronger to overcome the attachments that my body has. But you know, in the next life, you have your body and your soul, and I think you know that your body really has no weight and no presence. The punishment, may Allah protect us from that, or that the reward a person experiences in the grave is more of that of the soul, where the soul dominates your body. But in the hereafter, in Jannah, there is a perfect balance between body and soul, such that it's not just a physical experience, but it's also not just an experience of your soul, but it's both of them. And they have a perfect balance. And inshallah, when you go to Jannah, you have a new body that is a perfect age. It doesn't get sick, it doesn't get tired. In one hadith, the Prophet also mentions that the Ahlul Jannah la yanamun, the people of Jannah, they don't even sleep. Like they don't even have this issue where their body gets tired and fatigued, and they need to be away from the enjoyment of what's waiting for them in paradise. And so there's this perfect balance between body and soul, such that anything a person wants in Jannah, there is no concept that you want something except that you can enjoy it, except that you can have it. And in this world, it's the opposite. This world is inferior, it's the dunya, and it's something that even if you go on vacation or an all-inclusive package or anything that your dream vacation, you still cannot do everything that you want to do. You still cannot go everywhere. You still cannot do every activity. It's just not possible. But in Jannah, Jannah doesn't have that deficiency of that, oh, you have an idea to do something, but then you're not able to act upon it. And you're not able to do it. And so there's this perfect balance between body and soul. Anything that you want, anything that you're able to do, you can actually do it. And this falls in the ayah, وَلَكُمْ فِيهَا مَا تَشْتَهِي أَنفُسُكُمْ وَلَكُمْ فِيهَا مَا تَدَّعُونَ. You have a question? Sure. That's going to be a whole nother topic, inshallah. No, that's a good question. That's a good question. In the hellfire, we know that people have a body that also experiences so much pain. So it has the pain of the soul, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not being pleased with you, and then also of that, the body, the punishment that comes in the body, may Allah protect us from that, and then even their body, the skin feels the pain, they grow a new skin to go through that pain again. So there is that balance between body and soul as well, even in that the hellfire, may Allah protect us from that. So there's a hadith that I mentioned in the second khutbah today about the description that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the hadith Qudsi, in which the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, Allah says, أَعْدَدْتُ لِعِبَادِيَ الصَّالِحِينَ مَا لَا عَيْنٌ رَأَتْ وَلَا أُذُنٌ سَمِعَتْ وَلَا خَطَرَ عَلَى قَلْبِ بَشَرٍ. And this is a very important hadith because it kind of outlines at a very high level some important understandings of what's actually in Jannah. And even though it's a very high level, the Prophet ﷺ is saying that, first of all, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prepared. He says, I prepared for my righteous slaves. Sometimes you have a gift that's amazing, but imagine this time who's giving you that gift. Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, I have prepared for my righteous servants, my righteous slaves, what eyes have never seen before and ears have never heard before, وَلَا خَطَرَ عَلَى قَلْبِ بَشَرٍ, and has never occurred on the heart of a human being. Meaning imaginations have not yet pictured and conjured what's waiting for them in Jannah. What's waiting for us in this way in the future, in the hereafter, in this akhirah, is something that even when we hear some of these descriptions and we try to imagine it, for sure Jannah will exceed our expectations. And this is one of the really cool things about Jannah, as you look at the themes of Jannah and paradise, is one of them is that it will always surprise you. That even if you know something about Jannah, you know it so well in this world, when you actually experience it in the hereafter, you're going to say, oh my God, it's completely different. It's as if you didn't even know that description. Even something that's like the best thing of Jannah, which is the ability to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the people in Jannah, they're almost surprised. They're surprised that they get to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after enjoying all of this delight and luxury and satisfaction and serenity and peace. And then they say, oh, and we get to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you might know it right now, but when you actually experience it, it's going to be so mind-blowing that it's going to feel like you didn't even know it to begin with. And so that's one of the kind of consistent themes about Jannah. And this hadith highlights that as well, that your eyes have never seen before, ears have never heard before, and has not occurred on the heart of a human being. And one of the other interesting themes about Jannah, which you'll see as we go through some of the descriptions, is that many times the thing that's described is not the thing that you would actually describe if you had to explain attributes about something. It's usually like a smaller aspect of it. So for example, if you have a couch at your house or you want to buy a couch, the way you would explain a couch to somebody is its color, its fabric, its pattern, how comfortable it is. But if that couch is being described, like in Jannah, the only part of it that's really going to be described is maybe if you lift up the couch and there's that part underneath that everybody ignores, it's not something you think about, maybe that part will be described. Or for example, if you were describing your car, you would describe like the engine and the color and this and that. But perhaps if it was being described in Jannah, the part of it that would be described is like when you open the gasoline tank or like the plug-in area and you just like that little handle, that little door handle, and you just describe that to somebody. If you describe that to somebody, they're going to say, I don't know anything about your car. Like that doesn't help me in any way. And so sometimes, many times, the part of Jannah that's described is a very small kind of component of it that you wouldn't even think about normally. And I want us to think for a second, why would that be the case? Why would this like small aspect of it or minor aspect of it from our perspective, why would that be described instead of the actual, like the main thing? What do you guys think? Yes?
Because we wouldn't be able to comprehend what the rest of it is.
Okay, maybe we wouldn't be able to comprehend the rest of it. It's possible. What else? Okay, yeah, so imagine if this is like this, then imagine what's even greater than that. True, yeah, maybe you can't even relate to it because that's how amazing it is. Yeah, perhaps. One of the things that the scholars mention is that the other aspects of these items, it's fawq al-wasf, it's beyond description. And as the companions used to say, that the only thing that the things in this world have in common with the things in Jannah is that they have the same name so that we can relate to them. So like, oh, this is a tree, this is a house, this is that. So for example, when the Prophet ﷺ is given a gift from, I think, the Persians, and he gets like these fancy clothing, and he wears it, and then the Sahaba, they're so impressed by the clothing. They look at it and they say, man, these colors, we've never seen them before. Look at the style, look at this fabric, like where is this from, what is this? And the Prophet ﷺ was taken back by how like mesmerized the Sahaba were by this clothing, that he was not expecting them to be this like obsessed with it. And then he took a step back and he said that, this is a famous hadith, he says, لَمَنَادِيلُ سَعَدْ, that just the handkerchiefs of Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh radiallahu ta'ala anhu in Jannah are better and softer and nicer than this clothing. And to say that the handkerchief that somebody wears in Jannah is better than the nicest clothing that anybody can have in this world. And you know, a handkerchief is not the main part of your clothing. It's like an accent, or you use it as a utility, but it's not like the actual clothing that you wear. And so the Prophet ﷺ is saying just the manadid, just the handkerchief that Sa'ad has. And Sa'ad, we know, is an amazing companion. When he passed away, the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shook, and he's somebody who's so close to the Prophet ﷺ. But just his handkerchiefs are nicer than the best clothing you would have in this world. And so that's another theme that you'll notice as we go through descriptions. And I'm not sure actually how many descriptions we'll actually be able to get to, but I just wanted to share that because it's a common theme. So I'm going to share one ayah for time purposes because I want to get into the actions as well. I shared an ayah during the second khutbah, but I'm going to share a different one right now. There's an ayah in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala compares the worldly life to the life of the hereafter. And it gives us a really interesting perspective, and it gives us more self-awareness, how we should drive our opinions, our perspectives, our statements, our actions. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا هَذِهِ الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا لَهْوٌ وَلَعِبٌ وَإِنَّ دَارَ الْآخِرَةَ لَهِيَ الْحَيَوَانُ لَوْ كَانُوا يَعْلَمُونَ. That this worldly life is nothing but play and amusement, it's nothing but distraction, fun and games, but it is the house of the hereafter, Darul Akhirah, Lahiyal Hayawan. It is your true and actual life, لَوْ كَانُوا يَعْلَمُونَ. And the reason I wanted to share this ayah is because obviously it has to do with Jannah, but also because if somebody misunderstands this ayah, it's easy for them to misunderstand it if they don't have the context of the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. You know, the Quran and sunnah are so intertwined with one another. Or if they just kind of look at it at a high level without really knowing its context, it's easy for them to misunderstand. Because what is the ayah saying? The ayah is saying that the worldly life is nothing but a waste of time. It's just fun and games. But it is your home in the hereafter that is your true and actual life if they only knew. So if somebody's hearing this and they say, okay, well, this life is a waste of time, and instead of building a 401k, let me build a 401j. Let me focus on my good deeds in Jannah. And so why am I wasting my time with my responsibility and my classroom and this and school and work and all these things? Like, let me go and put in as much as I can in terms of good deeds, in terms of worship, so that I can rack up those points. And inshallah, in the hereafter, by Allah's mercy, I can enter into Jannah and I can relax. So what would you say to this person if they come up to you and they ask you this, that, you know, if you're putting these into perspective, like, obviously it doesn't even compare. So why waste your time building anything in the dunya? Yeah. Okay. So you can't just become like a monk and just like check out. Okay. Yeah.
For any deed to be accepted, it has two conditions. It has to follow first of all, it has to be with sincere heart, and then it has to follow the sunnah of the Prophet. So you have to understand what the Prophet say about this.
Sure.
He really asks us to stay like at home. We have so many hadith the Prophet asks the Sahabi to go and work.
Right.
You're not to do this.
So you would say, yeah, look at the sunnah, because what you're doing is not actually right. You want to be close to Allah, then you got to follow the Prophet ﷺ, and you would go in that direction. What else? These are good. These are very good. What else? Yes. Yeah, they're wealthy, and they worked to get their wealth. It wasn't just inherited or something like that. So definitely there's role models in Sahaba that we know were working day and night, and they were in the industry, and they were in different fields, but also the top, and some of them promised paradise. So there's like, something is not right just from that perspective. And the part of this ayah that I want to highlight are two things. One is that the worldly life, especially here, means a life where somebody does not believe in the hereafter. That if somebody believes only in the worldly life, without anything in the akhirah, they have no expectations, they don't believe that they're going to be responsible or rewarded for all the things that they're doing. If somebody doesn't believe in the hereafter, then وَمَا هَذِهِ الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا لَهْوٌ وَلَعِبٌ, then for sure this worldly life is nothing but a waste of time. Because even if you're a billionaire, even if you have the best house and the best family and the best car and the best whatever, but you forgot about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you ignored the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you said, no, I don't want anything to do with this, that there is no hereafter and there is no this and there is no that, then this person, even if they built the best empire a person can have in this world, then all they did is what a little kid does, or these kids are doing in the background, where they're just playing around and distracting themselves for a little bit of time and just having a little bit of fun. That's all they've done. But the person who believes in the hereafter, who's again living by the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, where they're not just in a cave, but they're leaving the cave and they're doing all the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us to do, that person, they will work in this world, but they're going to build brick by brick, they're going to be building their house in the hereafter. And that house, that dar, that home in the hereafter, is your real life, it's your actual life. And I like this ayah a lot because in this ayah there's a word that's used just once in the Quran. It is the word al-hayawan. And this word, it's kind of like the word haya, which means your life, but it is your true and actual life. And it's used once in the Quran almost to say that you have one actual life. That it's not this one. This one you got to invest. This is where you deposit everything, but the withdrawal is going to come in the hereafter, where that's your actual, true and actual life. And al-hayawan is a type of life where you have a lot of freedom and a lot of movement. Because a word that's on the pattern of fa'alan, like the word hayawan, it means that there's haraka inside of it. It means that there's movement inside of it. That means that the life that you have in the hereafter, that's the life where you're unrestricted. That's the life where there's no, like, you can do this, but you can't do that. That's the life where you have unlimited freedom, any direction you want to go, anything you want to do, anything that you desire, 100% it is yours. But this is the life that's restricted. And the scholars, they make the analogy that this is like you're sleeping, and when you see somebody who's sleeping, they're not really living their life. Maybe they're having a dream, but they're not actually living, they're not really active or doing any of these types of things. So in this life, we're sleeping. But that's the life that we're actually going to wake up. And when we do wake up, this entire life is going to feel like a day or part of a day. And this life is like the cover of your book. But all of the actual chapters of your story and your journey and everything that you're going to do in terms of actions and enjoyment and everything, all of those chapters are going to be written way into the future, and they're going to be written in the hereafter. And that's going to be your actual life. It's like comparing a shadow to a person. If somebody looks at your shadow, like how much of you are they actually going to know? They're not going to know who you are, what your beliefs are, what you look like. They're not really going to know much. But you, the actual person, that's al-hayawan. That's the true and actual life that's waiting for us in the hereafter. And it's almost like there was a life that you were living before where you were also restricted. Do you guys remember a life where you were completely restricted compared to the one you're in right now? Does anybody know what life I'm talking about? There was a time where all of us were in a situation where we're, in the womb of our mothers. So if somebody came up to that baby in the womb and said, you're living a life right now. You're enjoying, you're moving, you're existing, or whatever. But you're going to live another life where you're going to have so much freedom. you're going to live in Richardson, and you're going to eat this thing called biryani, and you're going to drive a car, and you're going to have an iPhone, and man, it's going to be insane. It's going to be so crazy. And imagine that baby in the womb who says, what are you talking about? Like, what kind of freedom is that? What kind of life is that? I don't want that life. I'm living a sick life right now. I'm in like this like ecosystem, and food comes to me on demand whenever I want. I move around, and everybody's like so impressed. I just do a little kick, and everybody goes crazy for it. Like, I'm living a good life. I don't need that freedom. But if you compare the freedom of this life compared to that restricted one, then you can only imagine, obviously the example is even more, but the life that's waiting for us, the unlimited freedom, unlimited movement that's waiting for us in the akhirah. And so that's an ayah that kind of puts everything into perspective, and especially if somebody does not believe in the hereafter, then they're in a very difficult situation. I'm going to skip some of these slides. Maybe I'll talk about this one. I'll talk about this one because sometimes there's a misconception about the levels of Jannah. And there is kind of matter of disagreement here, so you don't have to go 100% with what I'm saying. But it's good to be exposed to different options and different opinions and different evidences. So this question is, how many levels of Jannah are there? Is it one level of Jannah? Is it 7 levels of Jannah? Or is it like many levels of Jannah? And I just put hundreds there to just give an example. So let's do the voting thing again, just so we can do it. And everybody should vote, just so you can have some skin in the game, inshallah. So if you think it's one level of Jannah, then you put one finger up, and just use your index finger and stuff, inshallah. If you think it's 7 levels, then you just put 7 fingers up. And if you think it's many levels, then you just put all your fingers up, so that then indicates more than that. So let's do a vote. How many levels are there? You can put 1, put 7, or you can put 10, meaning like many, many more. There's a shortage of fingers in Richardson. Not everybody's participating. Okay, you can put your hands down. You guys look very funny, going like this and stuff. It looks very nice. So definitely there's other opinions here. So this is not like qat'i, it's not like for sure this is the one. But the reason I want to mention this is because there's a phrase in the Quran which when it gets translated, people kind of misinterpret it, especially when it's translated into English. And it's not really the intended meaning. And the phrase in the Quran is as-samawat as-sab', which refers to the 7 skies or the 7 layers of the universe. And many times it's translated as the 7 heavens. And obviously when we hear the word heaven, we associate it with the word paradise. But the word heaven here is not talking about Jannah. It's talking about like a part of the universe that has celestial bodies and stars and all these other things going on. And so many times we just heard the phrase 7 heavens, heavens and earth. And so we always think like 7, associating it with that. When in fact, it's not actually talking about heaven or Jannah. It's talking about layers of the universe and like the journey al-Isra wal-Mi'raj where the Prophet goes through different layers of the universe. And then Jannah is above that. And so because of that misinterpretation, I always want to mention this. But also because Shaitan, he wants to limit the size of Jannah, how vast it is and how amazing it is, so that it doesn't seem like this big of a thing, the azama that it should have. It just seems like it's a small thing, and you can compare it to other things as well. When in fact, Jannah is very large and very vast. And the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned that the distance between one level and the next is like the east to the west. And he said that sometimes when people in lower levels are looking at people at higher levels, it's like stars twinkling in the sky. And he said that a person, for example, a mujahid fi sabilillah, can have 100 levels of Jannah just to themselves. 100 daraja of Jannah just to themselves. And so from that hadith and other hadith as well, for example, the Prophet ﷺ, he said to female companion, Haritha, he said, Awa jannatun wahida, is it just one level of Jannah? But innaha jinan, but it's really many, many levels of Jannah. And so for that reason, there's no like 100% hard evidence that says, okay, this is how many levels of Jannah there are. In fact, there are many, many, many levels of Jannah. Some scholars mention that maybe it's equal to the number of ayat in the Quran because of the hadith where on the Day of Judgment, Iqra wartaqi, where you recite and you rise, and your position will be the last ayah that you recite on. But the main thing here is that there are many, 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 many levels of Jannah, and nobody knows for sure how many levels of Jannah there are. And one person can have 100 levels even just to themselves. And so I want to mention that just again more for that clarification. And we know that the person who's in the lowest level of Jannah, for example, if somebody said, okay, this is the person who's the poorest person in the world, then you would imagine, akramakumullah, you would imagine somebody who doesn't have proper clothing, they don't have food, they don't have shelter, they don't have this, they don't have that. But there is a person that the Prophet, he didn't describe as the poorest person in Jannah, but he described as having the lowest level of Jannah. And this is the person who's the most broken Jannah compared to everybody else. And this person, we know from one narration, has 10 times of this entire universe. Every person is a king or queen of their own dominion, their own universe in Jannah, and this person has 10 times that amount. And we know that we work all of our lives to earn just a fraction of what this dunya has, And we give up everything and anything in order to provide for ourselves, our families, whatever we can do. But the person who has the lowest level in Jannah, again, lowest level, like we're talking about, has 10 times, so you can only imagine what comes above that. And one of the action items that we can take from this is what the Prophet ﷺ said, that anytime you ask for Jannah, إِذَا سَأَلْتُمُ اللَّهَ الْجَنَّةَ فَاسْأَلُوهُ الْفِرْدَوْسَ الْأَعْلَى. Then make sure you ask for the highest of paradise. It is أَعْلَاهَا وَأَوْسَطُهَا. It's the highest of Jannah and like the middle of Jannah. So even though none of us deserve it, none of us can get Jannah except by Allah's mercy, we should always ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for al-firdaus al-a'la, the highest of Jannah. We want to be in paradise. And the word firdaus, it sounds like the word paradise as well. And the scholars mention that anybody who's in al-firdaus al-a'la is like a neighbor of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who has the highest part and position in Jannah. The other thing that I'll mention here is I'll just get into the actions, and then maybe we can just do a Q&A. And if some of the questions align with some of the things I was going to mention as well, that would be good as well. So this is the one that I shared during the second khutbah, which is about the scholars mentioning that we should seek Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the things they mention is the more that you seek Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, the more you'll be able to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning in the hereafter. Especially seeking Him in salah, meaning seeing Him in the hereafter. And one of the ways that we can increase and beautify our property in Jannah is by doing dhikr. And the one that I shared in the khutbah earlier was the one in Sahih al-Bukhari, in which the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he tells his daughter Fatima radiyallahu ta'ala anha and his son-in-law Ali radiyallahu ta'ala anhu that ala adullukuma ala ma huwa khayrun min khadim. Shouldn't I tell you something that's better than having a servant? And that is to say subhanallah when you go to sleep at night. You're in bed, you're going to go to sleep, to say subhanallah 33 times, alhamdulillah 33 times, Allahu Akbar 34 times. And I'm mentioning this one because of the other hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, in which he mentions that when he met Ibrahim alayhi salam, he told him that the land in Jannah is qi'an, it's flat and it's fertile, and the water is fresh, and it's waiting for people to plant seeds for the trees of Jannah. And he told him that the seeds for the trees of Jannah are subhanallah, alhamdulillah, la ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar. Meaning the more dhikr we do anytime, any given moment where we're able to do it, these deeds are going to be so heavy and massive on the Day of Judgment, inshallah. But not only that, there's a benefit from this hadith that the scholars mention, that when a person does subhanallah 33 times at night, alhamdulillah 33 times, Allahu Akbar 34 times, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala potentially gives them more barakah and more strength and more productivity and more output in this world. And if not that, then at the very least, or maybe at the very most, anytime you're doing dhikr, anything you could want in this world, you're getting something even better than that. You're getting a date palm tree in Jannah. And as the Prophet ﷺ said in a different hadith, that whoever says, Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, ghurisat lahu nakhlatun fil Jannah, that a date palm tree is planted for that person in Jannah. Anytime you say Subhanallah wa bihamdihi. And so one of my teachers used to say that, you might grow up and become an engineer, you might grow up and become a doctor, you might grow up and become this or that or whatever, but all of us, we also have to be farmers, that every day, every moment that we're able to, we're planting seeds for the trees of Jannah. We're saying Subhanallah wa bihamdihi. We're saying Subhanallah when we're going to sleep at night. Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar. And even if sometimes one of my other teachers, he said, sometimes you see something nice. Like once we were driving and he said, I saw a nice car. And he said, oh, would you like to have that car? You like that car? And I said, yeah, I wouldn't mind if I had that car. If Allah wanted to give me that, whatever the case may be, because I had to say something religious and stuff like that. So I was like, yeah, if Allah wants to give it to me, But I was like, yeah, I'd love to have that car. So he said, if you say Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, you have something better than that car. You have a date palm tree in Jannah. And inshallah, if you have date palm trees in Jannah, then inshallah you are a person in Jannah, because your property is increasing and beautifying in Jannah. So we don't have time to go through all of these things, but there's so much to talk about Jannah. There are springs in Jannah of salsabil and tasneem and kafura. And there are trees of Jannah, which we just talked about. There are descriptions of the people of Jannah. And there's some bridges and things like that I wanted to talk about as well. But I think the last thing I'll talk about is this action. So we have a dhikr action now. We learned that one. But I want to give one other action related to us in a relationship with other people. And this one is the one in which the Prophet ﷺ, he talks about guaranteeing a house in Jannah for the one who gives up arguing, even when they're right in that situation, especially for things that are not like consequential, not really actually important. Sometimes you get into such a silly argument. We've all been there. You're talking about like the color of something, or you're talking about sports, or you're talking about whatever, and it just starts off as a discussion, then it becomes a little heated, then it becomes an argument, then it becomes like offensive, and then it becomes like a fight, and then it becomes like, okay, these two people are not talking to each other, and then it becomes, okay, these brothers are not talking to each other. Then it just like spirals and spirals and snowballs into something where it seems like it's this huge gap, and it started over something literally nothing, started over nothing. And so the one who can recognize that and give up that argument man, inshallah, they're guaranteeing a place for themselves in Jannah from the promise of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then he said, I guarantee a house in the middle of Jannah for the one who abandons lying, even for the sake of fun. So giving up, having the standard of not lying, even when you're making a joke. And the last one, he says, I guarantee a house in the highest part of Jannah for the one who has good manners. And this is the part I want to end on, and I want to just give you a formula, inshallah, that you can always think about when you want to ask yourself, hey, am I having good manners in this situation? The Prophet ﷺ is the peak of moral conduct, the peak of high behavior. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلْقٍ عَظِيمٍ, that the Prophet ﷺ, you are above good manners. Get good manners, the Prophet ﷺ, he doesn't fall under good manners. Good manners, they fall under the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And I'll end with this hadith in which he talks about, he doesn't talk about manners, but he shows good manners. And the scholars, they take a formula from this hadith. And it's not even about manners, but you can just see from everything he does, all he does is good manners. And there was a time, and this is in Sahih Bukhari as well, in which the Prophet ﷺ was standing with a group of Sahaba, or he's with a group of companions, and on his right is a ghulam, is a young boy, and on his left are al-ashyakh, are older men. And somebody gives the Prophet ﷺ something to drink. And one hadith mentions that it's like a drink that's like kind of milk and water, kind of like a water bottle, you can think of it like that. And the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ is that if somebody gives you something to eat or drink, then if you want it, then you take from it. And then you give it to the person on your right. And if they want, they take from it. Then they give it to the person on their right. And it kind of works in this like indiscriminate way, where it doesn't look at people's status or things like that. There are some exceptions. For example, you can serve like your parents before your children and things like that. But generally speaking, it's like you don't think about it. Whoever's on your right, you give it to them. Then they, if they want, they take from it, and then they give it to their person on the right, and so on and so forth. Now in this situation, the person that's on his right is a little kid. And the person who's on his left are older men. So obviously the Prophet ﷺ, he would want to give it to the older men before he gives it to the little kid, right? Out of respect. Just like anybody, we can definitely empathize with that. And the Prophet ﷺ, he does something amazing. Because he's the one who's going to teach us good manners. So we know anything he does will never have bad manners inside of it. So we need to look at his example, not us think about, okay, what would I do in that situation? We say, what is the Prophet ﷺ going to do in that situation? So I know what to do in that situation. And the Prophet ﷺ, he asks this little kid, he says, أَتَأْذَنُ لِي أَنْ أُعْطِيَ هَؤُلَاءِ. He says to this little kid, do you give me permission to give it to those older people first? Meaning the Prophet ﷺ, he didn't just tell this little kid, he didn't say, okay, I'm going to teach you something good here. It's better to give it to the older people out of respect. He doesn't even tell him. He gives him what the scholars mention, al-ihtiram wal-haq. He gives him respect and he gives him rights. Where he asks a little kid, and you can imagine this, like if you're at a party or something and maybe your son or a little kid is next to you, you wouldn't even maybe give him the time of day. You would say, what are you even doing here? Like you're not even supposed to be here. But the Prophet ﷺ, the greatest of mankind, is asking this little kid, do you give me permission to give them the drink first? And this kid, the Prophet ﷺ is giving him his full right, because nobody can take away his rights, and he's giving him respect on top of that. So anytime I want to ask myself, do I have good manners? I have to ask myself, okay, am I being respectful or am I being rude? And am I fulfilling people's rights or am I violating their rights? And this is one of the formula of good manners, that anything from the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ is always going to be good manners. But in everyday life and things where maybe there's not a one-to-one fit, you have to ask yourself, am I fulfilling people's rights and am I being respectful? And in the hadith, again in Sahih Bukhari, the kid, he has to give an answer too, right? Because the hadith is not going to end there. The kid has to give a response when the Prophet ﷺ says, hey, do you give me permission to give the drink to those older people? So what do you think this little kid said? You can put your thumbs up if you think he said yes. Yes, Ya Rasulullah, please give them the drink. Or put your thumbs down if you said, no, there's no way, I'm not going to give it. What do you guys think? Thumbs up or thumbs down? You guys are pretty conflicted. It's like 50-50 almost. Okay. One guy went like this. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that one is. So when I heard this, I thought for sure this kid is going to say yes. You know, and then the Prophet was going to say, oh, ask me for anything, and then it's like one of those situations. That's not what happened. This kid, he said no. But the reason he gave was amazing. He didn't say, oh, I'm playing basketball, I'm like so thirsty, like I need water or something like that. He didn't say that. The reason he said that I cannot give this nasib or this fadl, there's different narration. Ma kuntu an urtiya nasibi or this fadl li haula. He says, and the meaning of this is like, he's saying, I can't give this opportunity that if I have the chance to drink right after the Prophet ﷺ, if I have that opportunity, like I can't give that to somebody else, I gotta take that opportunity. And it's a really interesting reason. And the Prophet ﷺ, he didn't say, okay, well that's good, but so out of respect you should give it. He didn't say that. He accepts it. And he gives it to him, and the kid, he drinks from it, and then he gives it to his right, and so on and so forth. And so he gives like an interesting reason as well. And you can see how much the companions, even the kids, they love the Prophet ﷺ so much that he's saying no to him out of love for him, and that he doesn't want to give it to those older people. And so it's pretty amazing. I think I'll end over here, inshallah. I have a bunch of questions that I can ask you guys. And if you guys don't have any questions, then I'll ask those questions, and we can maybe have an interesting discussion, and then we can go from there. So first, are there any questions from anything that I mentioned? Or high level, anything from Jannah? If I can address it, I will. And if not, then that's fine as well, inshallah. Yes? Yeah. I can just mention high level. He's talking about the Jannah that Adam a.s. was in, and there's scholars have different opinions whether that was the Jannah that's like the in perpetuity Jannah that we're talking about right now. It was like a different isolated version, or it was something else altogether. And at a high level, we know that the Jannah he was in was not forever because he came to earth. And so the Jannah that we're talking about is a Jannah in which it's permanent and there is no removal from that. And so it already has this like contrasting difference to begin with. And so that type of experience will still be something that eyes have never seen before and ears have never heard, and has never even occurred on the heart of a human being, because it will not have any of the limitations that there was only one limitation, but it won't have the limitations that Adam a.s. went through. And so whether he was in the Jannah of the Jannah or the Jannah of something else, it's kind of open to interpretation, but it still wasn't permanent. So we know it's different, at least in that sense. Allah knows best. Any other questions about Jannah, high-level items? Yeah, we're gonna end in a minute, inshallah. Yeah. Yeah.
The world of the dunya and the barzakh and the akhirah. So what did the Prophet actually see? Were they people from the vision of the future, or were these people of the past of some other dunya?
So he's talking about when the Prophet went al-Isra wal-Mi'raj and what he's seeing in those visions. He's seeing people in heaven, in hellfire. May Allah protect us from that. Are those visions of the future? Are there people there right now? Because how do you reconcile that between saying that no eyes have never seen it, no ears have ever heard it, so on and so forth? And so high level, the understanding is that the Prophet, what he's seeing are things in the future, because the people that are going to be in Jannah, they're not in Jannah right now. And the people that are going to be, the only people that would be in Jannah right now would not be in the way that you experience Jannah forever and ever and ever. Those would be the shuhada. May Allah make us amongst them. Those are the people that are in the hearts of green birds. And they are the only people that get to skip the entire barzakh and have an experience in Jannah, but not the real experience of Jannah, of getting to do everything that you want to do with a real body and everything like that. So all of that will still happen in the future. And even the Prophet ﷺ, that experience of doing everything that you want in paradise, even when he's visiting it, he's not getting to visit it in that way where he's admitted into paradise. That's going to happen in the future as well. And he says in a different hadith that I'm the first one who knocks on the gates of Jannah and I'm admitted into paradise. So he's the first one who actually enters into paradise, proper paradise where you get to be there forever and enjoy the actual bounties of paradise with your eyes of Jannah, not the eyes of like this world, the eyes of Jannah, the ears of Jannah, the sensations of Jannah. And so Allah knows best, but nobody is experiencing that in that way of permanence and perfectness, and only that will happen in the future. Allah knows best. Yeah, it's very interesting. You guys are very academic here. These are not the usual questions that I get, but they're interesting nonetheless. Any other questions? And I'll still be here if you guys have questions afterwards, but I had questions I want to ask you guys too. Yeah, these are the types of questions I usually get. That's good. Are you in college by any chance? Okay, this is what college people usually ask. They're like, oh, you can do whatever you want in Jannah. What about like haram things in Jannah? Or like somebody's like one time this person is like wearing all black hair, black everything. They're like, you know, what if like in Jannah, like the only thing I enjoy is like the pain and misery of other people and like bloodshed and things like that. And so like, well, what I have in Jannah? And so obviously that's a fair question, because I mean I think he's genuinely asking that. But at the same time, there's a bridge that the Prophet ﷺ talks about called the Qantara. And this bridge, he talks about that when people go across this Qantara, anybody who is on the bridge of the Qantara, they're already a person of Jannah, meaning they've already passed the Sirat and all the judgment, everything's already happened. And so there's another bridge that the people of Jannah, they go over. It's not like a scary bridge or anything like that. But in that bridge, one of the things that happens, and there's more than this, but one of the things that happens is that your fitrah is purified, such that when you enter into Jannah, those things that are not befitting of Jannah, or that, haram might not be the proper word anyways, because there could be things in Jannah that you can do that you might consider them haram here, but they wouldn't be haram over there, like drinking, and for example, and things like that are mentioned. But maybe you wouldn't think that because you already know it from the Quran. But the main point is that your fitrah would be purified. So anything that's not befitting of Jannah, it would not be part of you anyway, but you would still have your memories and your personality and all that kind of things. And really anything that you want in Jannah, it can still be possible in ways that you and I maybe cannot perceive. But anything that a person can want in Jannah, they can have that. And they would not have like jealousy, like if they were in a lower level or something like that. So those kind of things that are not befitting of Jannah, they would not want that to begin with. So inshallah, Allah knows best, but definitely it's easy to reconcile between those. Qantara. Qantara also means bridge in Arabic. It's like a normal word for bridge, even in modern standard Arabic. So there's hadith that you can look up about the qantara as well. Any other questions? Yes. You talking about the black stone? What did you say? What are you talking about? Oh, pomegranates? I've not heard that before, but I know people sometimes they eat something, they say, oh, this is so heavenly, it's divine and stuff like that, but that doesn't mean it's from Jannah. So I've never heard that before, but maybe we can talk about it afterwards. Okay, so maybe we can end over here, inshallah. And if you have any other questions or any other comments, my email is here as well, inshallah. I appreciate all of you guys staying here for this discussion. And I'll still be here if you have other questions or other things that you want to talk about, because sometimes there's other questions that maybe you don't want to ask in a group and things like that. But jazakumullah khairan, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us all the highest of paradise. Allahumma inna nas'aluka ladhata an-nadri ila wajhika al-kareem wa shawqa ila liqa'ik wa sallallahu ala sayyidil awwalin wal akhirin. Assalamu alaikum.